Mostly cloudy.
Wait a minute. I can't see what I look like because it's too little. Hello.
Do you like watching the weather? The weather report?
I do that the first thing in the morning, which is very interesting in Florida.
Here's your forecast for the next few days. The heat is on.
What's it like for you to go outside in this heat?
Not fun. I put the garage door up and it's like something hit you. You're like walking into a wall of heat and humidity. It's pretty uncomfortable. We also have malaria.
What?
Oh, you didn't hear about the malaria in Florida?
Mosquito spraying trucks in Florida are ready to fight the bite after 2 more cases of malaria were reported in Sarasota County.
There's a bad mosquito that got here.
Is it one mosquito?
No, I guess there's more than one.
How's it affecting your life, the weather?
I don't like it. It's boring. I'm inside. I either read a book, look at TV, talk to somebody on the phone. I've gone to the movies a couple of times, which I normally wouldn't do. I saw Indiana Jones.
Oh, how was it?
It was okay. I wouldn't tell you to rush.
How do you feel about the current state of things with the weather?
It's frightening.
Wildfire smoke from Canada is once again making air quality unhealthful.
Scientists warns July could become the Earth's hottest month, and hundreds,
Phoenix topped
if not
110
thousands
degrees today for the
14 million residents are under flash flood alerts.
Torrential downpours dumped at least 8 inches of rain in the area.
It's pretty scary that the climate in the world is changing.
How do you feel about what the human race has done to the earth?
I'm not happy about it because the people that are in control are not ignorant people. They're just want to make money or be in power. But this is serious. This is destroying our planet. I mean, if I understand a little of the cause, can you imagine what the people that really know what they need to do and aren't doing it, and then now they're seeing these effects, how they must feel? I can't even imagine.
Are you worried about the future of our planet?
I'm worried for my children and my grandchildren.
What advice do you have for the world right now?
You know, I usually have advice for everybody. I don't know what to tell people. I don't know what I can do to make it better.
Do you have hope?
Yes. Like with a lot of things, you got to take it like a day at a time. There's a lot we can't change anymore, but we certainly can help it from getting worse.
This is kind of a depressing conversation. How can we end it on a positive note?
Well, I'm going out for dinner tonight.
Unbelievable, and how horrifying that scientists and meteorologists and people like that are waking up to the facts of seeing just exactly how much destruction that we are bringing upon ourselves because of the greedy selfishness coming from people profiting off of the oil petroleum products.
The nation, with days to go before a government shutdown, Congress is paralyzed by infighting.
The arsonists have lit their house on fire. They're whining about their house burning.
Fiery words from top Republicans who worked through the weekend to find a way forward on funding the government before month's end. Will you work with Democrats?
Look, I believe we have a majority here, and we can work together to solve this.
Can Republicans unify and strike a deal that also works for the Democratic-controlled Senate? We'll have the latest on negotiations. Then,
our immigration system is absolutely broken, and Congress needs to fix it.
America's southern border is under strain once again, with migrant crossings on track to hit record highs. We'll ask Texas Republican Tony Gonzalez what he is seeing in his district and whether the issue could complicate spending negotiations on Capitol Hill. Plus,
No justice!
no peace! The labor protest targeting America's big three automakers expands as workers in 38 locations in 20 states go on strike. We'll hear this morning from Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who's headed to Missouri later today to join a picket line. Arizona Democratic Senator Mark Kelly just got back from a trip to Ukraine. We'll ask him what he learned. Former Trump National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien will also join us. And finally, a conversation with the First Lady of Ukraine, Olena Zelenska, about the horrors of war and the hard work of healing. It's all just ahead on Face the Nation. Welcome to Face the Nation. It's setting up to be another consequential week in Washington, with just a few days to go before a possible government shutdown unless Congress strikes an 11th-hour deal to fund it. We'll get to that in a moment, but we begin with New York Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on the expanding auto workers strike. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
This strike now in 20 states. I know you are headed to Missouri
20
later
states.
to strike outside a GM facility. The president goes to Michigan Tuesday. He only announced that after Donald Trump said he was going to UAW strike. Do you think injecting this high level of presidential politics complicates getting a settlement?
Well, I think right now we are in such a crisis in our economy, a crisis of inequality, that it is going to take a level of political and popular support, unlike that we've seen in a strike situation like this in recent and modern history, in order for us to get a breakthrough. What we've seen at the big three are CEOs giving themselves as much as a 40% wage and compensation increase, while workers have actually seen a real wage decrease over the last 10 to 15 years. And in order for us to break that norm, I think it's going to take an unprecedented level of involvement to make sure that workers get what they deserve here.
UAW's president, when he was with us last week, said, when I asked him why the union hadn't yet endorsed President Biden, he said that has to be earned. Mm-hmm. That sounds like he's disappointed that party leadership is not doing as much as they could. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think it always has to be earned. And President Biden showing up to the picket line on Tuesday is a historic event. We have never seen in modern history a president show up to a picket line like this. And I think it should be earned. It needs to be earned. And I believe that President Biden is working towards that, especially when he lands in Michigan on Tuesday, to earn that.
You know, one of the things that's happening in the auto industry, as you know, is this market shift and transition to electric vehicles. You were quoted back in July saying you look forward to buying a union-made electric vehicle, but you currently have a non-union-made Tesla. UAW already makes some electric vehicles. So why wasn't that? Is it a problem with the quality? Is it a problem with the style? Is the market just not there?
No, our car was purchased during the pandemic when before a vaccine had come out. So travel between New York and Washington, the safest way that we had determined was an EV, but that was prior to some of the new models coming out on the market that had the range available. But we're actually looking into trading in our car now. So we're looking into it, and hopefully we will soon.
Elon Musk, who has a majority share in Tesla, has said a lot of things against the unions. Mm-hmm. And a lot of these electric vehicle battery manufacturing plants as well are not unionized. Mm-hmm. So there's tension here.
Yes. Yeah. And it's something that I have been speaking with President Fain about, because one thing that we're all on the same page about is that we do not want the transition from a fossil fuel economy to an electric economy to represent an erosion in the unionization and rights of workers.
You're quoted in the New York Times in August as saying immigration is arguably this administration's weakest issue. Mm-hmm. What did you mean?
Well, I think the politics around immigration in the United States is to no surprise to many people, one of the most contentious issues. We saw this dramatically inflamed under President Trump, but it remains to be a very controversial and contentious issue. And that makes, I believe, enacting some of the policy changes necessary much more complicated and difficult. Now, this week, after perhaps almost a year of pushing from both the Congressional Hispanic Caucus to the New York delegation in Congress, we pushed to make sure that the Biden administration extended temporary protective status, otherwise known as TPS, for Venezuelans, which will allow and open the pathway for Venezuelan migrants to actually begin working and supporting themselves, which will reduce the strain on our public systems, particularly New York's shelter system and more.
It's for 500,000 Venezuelans, but only if they came here before July.
Yes.
So does Congress need to do something like the HIRE Act that one of our guests, Tony Gonzalez, has put forward, or others, to put that into law, so it's not just a one-off?
Well, I definitely think that we need to have comprehensive immigration reform so that we aren't constantly doing this patchwork policy extensions. That has not happened for decades. But additionally, I think we also need to examine the root of this problem, because if we are constantly engaging in foreign policy that drives people to our southern border, in this specific instance, U.S. sanctions that were originally authored by Marco Rubio began and certainly took a large part in the driving of populations to our southern border. Shortly after those sanctions, those broad-based sanctions.
You're talking about Venezuela?
Yes. Shortly after those broad-based sanctions were enacted, we started seeing dramatic increases in these populations that were coming to our southern border. And so we have to address the root of these population movements and the migration crisis. And we also have to address the domestic U.S. policy issues when it comes to immigration reform.
But the Maduro government has also been responsible for large parts of that. Are you saying that you want the Biden administration to pull back pressure on him?
I think we need to re-examine the nature of these sanctions. There are sanctions that are very specific. For example, the Magnitsky Act sanctions that do actually focus on the decision makers and people who may be violating norms, practices, civil rights. But broad-based sanctions that punish the overall economy and harm everyday working people that are driving them into the economic and political destitution that force millions of people, both not just to the United States, but even to our regional partners.
Senator Bob Menendez of New Jersey, as you know, has just been indicted on bribery charges. Should he resign? And what do you think of his statement that it has to do with him being a Latino?
Well, I think the situation is quite unfortunate, but I do believe that it is in the best interests for Senator Menendez to resign in this moment. As you mentioned, consistency matters. It shouldn't matter whether it's a Republican or a Democrat. The details in this indictment are extremely serious. They involve the nature of not just his, but all of our seats in Congress. And while, as a Latina, there are absolutely ways in which there is systemic bias, but I think what is here in this indictment is quite clear. And I believe it is in the best interest to maintain the integrity of the seat. I want to emphasize that all people must be extended the presumption of innocence until proven guilty.
Some Republican members like Matt Gaetz have threatened to try to oust Speaker McCarthy through a motion to vacate. Would you vote with him as a Democrat to get to 218 to oust Speaker McCarthy?
I mean, I think that we would have to cross that bridge when we get to it. Speaker McCarthy has been very weak. I think that he has also engaged in just absolutely terrible decision-making for the American people, from continuing to try to cement denying the right to an abortion among women, to the denial of to policy that denies the reality of climate change, to basic fiscal irresponsibility and recklessness. We are at the brink of a shutdown right now. And so absolutely, I think there is grounds. However, we are also in the midst of an extremely chaotic Republican Party, and we do not want chaos to reign in Washington either.
Congresswoman, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
We turn now to Texas Republican Congressman Tony Gonzalez, who joins us from San Antonio this morning. Congressman, a lot to get to with you, but I want to start on that question of what we should brace for in the coming days in regard to a shutdown. You had said you opposed a short-term deal, a continuing resolution to keep the government funded in the near term. Speaker McCarthy's floated a 45-day short-term deal with border provisions added into it. Are you still a hard no?
I think, good morning, Margaret. Thank you for having me. Continuing resolutions don't solve the problem. They just kick the can down the road. And so we have to lock ourselves in the room and solve the problem. And the way you do that is by passing House conservative appropriation bills and working with the Senate. This is, I called it a month ago, and I said we're on a path to a shutdown because Speaker McCarthy wants that and President Biden wants that. Everyone feels as if this is a political problem that they can just blame one another. Who's going to get hurt the most is the American public. So we have to come together and we have to pass appropriation bills. That's where I'm at.
But in order to pass those 11 bills, only one of the 12's been passed, you need time. And then you got to send it to the Senate, then they have to reconcile it, then you got to send it to the president. You don't have that kind of time, most likely. So without signing on to a short-term patch, are you basically saying you want to see a shutdown?
I don't want to see a shutdown, but in my experience, if you give Congress more time, they're just going to take that time. Time does not equal solutions. And the exact opposite. If there is a hard cliff, then they are forced to come together, and that's what I think we need. We need to have a hard line that forces everyone to get in the room and pass these bills. I don't want to see a shutdown, but there is no doubt in my mind that the country is headed for a shutdown, and everyone should prepare as such.
Do you have confidence in Speaker McCarthy's ability to lead?
You know, I wouldn't bet on Kevin McCarthy, but I also wouldn't bet against him. I'm in a district where I'm just trying to keep my head above water. You know, this border crisis is very real. Margaret, it's very similar to when a school shooting hits your town, and sadly, too many Americans know what that's like. Or a hurricane, and this border crisis is as if a Category 4 hurricane has hit. So I don't have the time to pontificate on political futures for other people. We're just trying to keep our head above water here in Texas.
Well, if there is a shutdown, are the Border Patrol agents in your district prepared to show up to work at a time of migrant spike and not get paid?
You know, that's the ugly part of a shutdown is you're gonna have real people get hurt. But right now, Border Patrol agents are showing up to operate in processing centers. They're not out in the field, so they're not really doing their jobs, and they haven't been doing their jobs. And many agents have told me, you know what, Tony? Right now, I mean, give you an example, in El Paso, the facility, 200 Border Patrol agents are in that soft-sided facility taking care of migrants, meaning they're not out in the field protecting America from bad actors. So in many cases, they might as well already be shut down.
Who is preventing that?
It's the failed Biden administration. You know, when we talk about the border crisis, we know what the problem is. The problem is Joe Biden's failed immigration policies. We see the images, we hear the stories, but we never hear solutions. Let's talk some solutions. One, I think the House should immediately take up the Homeland Appropriations bill. You know, Republicans can't just be the party of rhetoric. We have to be the party of solutions. And there are some solutions in this bill. One of those is I've been pushing very hard, and many of my colleagues, to end catch and release. I have an amendment in that Homeland bill that ends catch and release. Another one is, once again, the Border Patrol agents, they're out of the game. The folks that are doing the real work are the sheriffs and the deputies. And there's a program called Stone Garden, and there's a $10 million upgrade for that. This helps with manpower and equipment to help fight the border crisis. But the third piece, which I'd argue is the most important, is repatriation flights. And when I met with Secretary Mayorkas earlier this week, that's what I asked him for, repatriation flights, meaning if somebody does not qualify for asylum, you don't bus them to New York, you don't send them to LA, you don't let them go to other places. You send them back to their country of origin. If we do that, that is how the crisis ends short term. And then long term, there needs to be some movement on immigration reform in Congress.
But you can't do that with Venezuelans. Part of the problem here. Secretary Mayorkas took the president of Honduras to the border yesterday. They have sent military members to work in offices. They've granted 500,000 Venezuelans these work permits, potentially. Do you support any of that?
In my eyes, that's going the wrong way. 800 troops to the border solves nothing. They might as well be human cones if you don't allow them to interact with migrants.
Regardless whether it's Mexico, Honduras, El Salvador, Belize, Brazil, Chile, whoever. These countries that obviously have been inundated by a culture, a drug culture, in regards towards the cartels. They have now gotten caught, basically, metaphorically speaking, with their pants down. Their countries are out of control. I have said this before. The fault falls upon the feet of the authorities that are in all these different countries on the same continent below us. And until they are willing to reform their system in making it more profitable, more appealing for their own citizens to stay in their own countries, until they're willing to put down all the drug violence and all the rapes and the maliciousness going on within their borders, until they're willing to do that, we are going to continue to see a steady flow of illegal immigrants coming to our country. Now that is on a negligent form. Now let's look at it from a terrorism form. You got countries all over the world that have awakened to this archway that now people from all sectors of life can come to those coastal lining areas. Once they get into the landmass, then they can do as everyone else does, being a mix, nothing but a mix, to the point that some of your most deadliest, lethalest, wickedest, meanest, cruelest people either are on their way into America or possibly already in America. So we actually have two different entities going at the same time. We have the entity of carelessness, and we have the entity of intentionally people coming over to America to bring harm and hurt to our great nation, to the people in our great nation. This is the reason why the border needs to be shut down on all accounts. I don't care if it's on the south border towards Texas and New Mexico and Arizona and California, or if it's on the east coast or the west coast or the north coast, the north border. It needs to be shut down. We need to evaluate what the heck is going on and how is our government officials going to be able to bring stability and safety to their own people that are paying them to protect us. And if they cannot figure out a game plan, then it is time for the people to speak up in regards towards our own safety and our own benefit here in America. what we're seeing, and we thought that we was going to be spared pertaining to COVID regarding how our American government handled this particular situation. What we're seeing is the aftermath of that. It's kind of like a storm. After a storm gets through doing whatever that storm has done, then you can go in behind the storm and start looking around and seeing all the trees, all the power lines, all the homes have been destroyed, are damaged. What we're dealing with today is the aftermath of COVID. We thought that we was going to be smart enough or fortunate enough to be able to scathe without getting badly hurt or burnt pertaining to this disease that was manufactured by man, that deliberately was set into society the way that it was. And because we're dealing with the aftermath in a way is just as bad, if not worse, than what it has, or how that it has affected some of these other countries that didn't have a strong government system like ours, towards basically giving out all these stimulus checks the way that our government did, that has had a backfiring effect towards giving the people in America, some of them, not all of them, but a lot of them, the impression that now our government is going to bail them out and they're entitled to these stimulus checks. In other words, it spoiled them. It spoiled them to the degree that a lot of these mama papa businesses right now are begging for help, and they may get somebody in there today, but if it's the younger class that's already either was born messed up because their parents was on drugs, or maybe they themselves are on drugs, they're lucky if they stay at work 2 or 3 weeks or a month before they wind up telling somebody to kiss their tail and walking out. In addition to what we're dealing with pertaining to AI, that has now come into our lives, come into our homes, that if you'll add fear along with the younger generation that is savvy whenever it comes to artificial intelligence, to be able to work their little gizmos and gadgets that they hold in their hands, it has added another formula to the degree that because they don't want to socialize, because they don't want to go to malls, because they don't want to go shopping the way that the typical person used to shop, now they're shopping online, and it is destroying what is left of the mama and papa shops. I know for a fact that whenever COVID first hit America, there was a major shutdown pertaining to the restaurant industry that probably won't never recuperate from the damages that has been done. There was something like 120, 125, maybe 130,000 restaurants that had to shut down. Cracker Barrel was one of them that struggled towards keeping their doors open, but it was extremely tough, especially whenever you have workers, cooks, electricity bills, mortgage payments, and at the end of the day, you may have had 200 people versus 2,000 people that you normally serve. So it was a horrible reflection upon to a great deal of the hospitality industries that could not stand the lick, and they claim that over 70,000 of those restaurants that I'm talking about will never recuperate and come back. And the only reason why a lot of them did survive was because they was very creative. They either cut a wall in the side of their wall, cut a hole in it to where they had carry-outs, or they had people that could drive up towards drive-in windows, and people call in and do deliveries that way. But AI, on top of COVID, on top of the war going on in Ukraine, and on top of what the oil petroleum companies have relentlessly been a part of for the past 30 plus years towards ignoring the damages that they're doing to not only our atmosphere above our heads, but also the irreversible damages that they're doing below our feet pertaining to messing with the ecosystem, because the oil was put there for a reason, and the reason wasn't so we could drive around on Sunday with our cool glasses on, with our top down, and acting like Mr. Cool, the coolest thing that's ever walked the planet. That was not why God manufactured this planet and had oil that was put there through thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions of years, through foliage coming and dying and everything else that come and gone. That oil was put there for a shield, and it was put there to help to reduce the friction whenever the platelets is moving up and down and back and forth. You got the high tide, the low tide, you got the full moon, the half moon. The earth is basically a living organism that's constantly shifting and moving and doing things that we didn't know that as little as probably 100 years ago. Our scientists, even back in the Carter era, I think I've mentioned this before, was very aware of what was going on pertaining to the oil petroleum typhoons. It was addressed to our government at the time and ignored. Basically, Carter's administration said, well, whenever we get to that year point and we're having that type of damage, then address us then. You can't address something that is in a forward motion towards thousands upon thousands of brand new wells being tapped every day. Maybe not necessarily in America, but in other parts of the world. You got 7 continents that these people are digging and crawling and scratching and trying to bring up every drop of blood that they can. I call the oil blood, symbolically speaking, but they're trying to draw every ounce of the oil out of the ground at the same time, not realizing that they're destroying themselves. In addition to all the gizmos and gadgets, everything that runs, that creates friction, it's creating artificial heat, in addition to all the human movement and all the concrete buildings and concrete this and all the blacktop roads and etc., we have created a atmosphere of a ticking time bomb. A ticking time bomb, not just from above our heads, but below our feet. And if we are not smart enough to address these things properly and promptly, we will be bringing the devastation to civilization as we know it. And yes, artificial intelligence has had a big deal in all that. Like I said, whenever it's more convenient to get online and order something and it comes to your house the next day, it's very obvious who is taking over the market. Now, one other thing I want to bring to my viewers' attention. As of Friday, I had some baby clothes, I had some baby toys, I had some baby stuff that I wanted to send to my son. Less than 4 hours away. I'm going to use that terminology. And the box was approximately 18 inches deep, 18 inches lateral speaking, and vertically speaking, it was probably about 24 inches, not quite even 24 inches. The box had 9 pounds of plastic toys and clothes in the box. 9 pounds. It costed me $7 for the box and the packing, and then another $40 for the weight to be distributed of what it costed to send that package of toys and clothes to my son and daughter-in-law pertaining to my granddaughter. $47. I was lucky if I had $47 invested in the toys and the clothes. And the reason being is because I consider myself a smart shopper, and ordinarily I don't buy something immediately whenever they put it out on the shelf. I wait until they mark it down or they put it on clearance. So it actually costed me more money to package it and send it off than it did for me to actually purchase the items that I was putting in the box. Which leads me to a decision that I'm having to make, because I still want to help my son. I still want to help my granddaughter. So the only thing that I know to do is to get money orders or to send direct Western Union stuff, maybe to Walmart or something like that. You can send Western Union or Walmart to a Walmart. It don't matter if it's in America or wherever, for X amount of dollars, which I think is pretty reasonable in how that they do that. But the only thing that I know is to set up other arrangements, because I'm not going to spend all my money for some FedEx or UPS worker to make their living off of panhandling off of me. I refuse to do it. This is basically the second time or third or fourth time that I've actually been out money like this to be able to do this for my granddaughter. And the last time I had such of a load that I filled up my truck that's got a camper shell on it, all the way, stuffed it from the bottom all the way to the top of the camper, as far as I could stack it with all kinds of camping equipment, all kinds of toys, all kinds of clothes, all kinds of everything. And I knew that if I was going to have to mail that particular much stuff off, it would probably cost me several thousands of dollars for shipping. So rather than paying all that extra money for shipping and basically throwing your money away, I got in my vehicle and I drove down there, which gave me an opportunity of seeing my granddaughter for the first time. It gave me an opportunity of seeing my daughter-in-law, and it gave me an opportunity of seeing how my son was doing when going and visiting. So actually, I, killed two birds with one stone. I got to see on hands my granddaughter, and I didn't have to blow all the money towards UPS or FedEx delivery systems. But I'm just telling you, to my viewers, the next best thing, even though I love to shop and I love to find bargains, I'm a bargain hunter. I love to find bargains, especially whenever I'm shopping for other people. I'm going to have to limit that because of the way that the system has now taken over itself, and basically FedEx and UPS has dominated the transit system to the degree that now it's actually shutting down mama and papa businesses. Like the mall in Dyersburg is fixing to shut down, if it hadn't already, because of lack of foot traffic. Lack of foot traffic. These kids growing up today does not have either the social skills, or they just do not choose to want to have a one-to-one relationship with anybody, and it's based around fear because of what COVID has created, and it's also based around convenience pertaining to being able to shop online. So because of the mixture of all this that has occurred just within the past, I guess, 3 to 5 years, of course, artificial intelligence, the internet, it's been on the go-go now for, I guess, the past, I guess it's been on the go-go now for at least 10 years, towards it being as prominent as what it is, and it being so open that now any and everybody can go online, or they can Google something, or they can talk and text, or they can do things today conveniently, either in their home or in their boat or in their car or outside camping or whatever, that they can do things just as conveniently today as what at one time it used to take for them to use up precious time and resources towards walking to the mall and actually eyeballing what they wanted to purchase. There are disadvantages to online purchasing, kind of like what a UPS worker was telling me the other day, or a FedEx worker, that a lot of these women, they'll order stuff from bath products, and then after they get it in, they smell it, and they don't like the smell, and then they go down to the bath place anyways to exchange the products that they didn't like. So there are certain advantages pertaining to online shopping, but there's also disadvantages to online shopping, because you're not going to get the full effect of what you're actually purchasing until it actually comes to your door. In the meantime, now you've been out all that money towards extra handling fees pertaining to mailing expenses, that is just turning into a free-for-all, an absolute free-for-all. And then we got the bigger problems that we're looking at pertaining to illegal immigrants, the drug problem, the gun problem, the crime problem, the jail problem. So many problems has just overwhelmingly been dumped upon society's laps just within the past 5 years. And I could only begin to imagine in what kind of environment that it would be if I was living in Mexico right now, or Honduras, or Colombia, or Brazil, or other places all over the world, like Africa, or even Australia, that went through their major fires and stuff pertaining to the droughts, or even the UK, or over towards where the Ukrainian people have been suffering pertaining to all that was engineered by mankind. I can only begin to imagine how horrifying that some of those people are going through right now in some of those other countries. So please, if you listen to this, if you watch this, be fortunate on Face the Nation that you are an American citizen, that you are a sovereign citizen of America. But at the same time, the American people have to take care of the American people. And once you realize that something is totally out of control, the way that our bordering system is, then it's time for us to stand up and say enough is enough. Shut the immigration system down for right now until we can figure out what the hell is going on. And I don't mean to curse, and I don't mean to get angry, but this is like a infestation that has infestated us. It's like all of a sudden like a cancer on top of all these other problems that we don't have a solution towards, and we're not going to have a solution towards until we go back to the altar and we get our hearts and our lives right with God. Because this is something that is going to require a supernatural entity, because we are under an invasion of another supernatural entity pertaining to evil. And the only way to fight evil, that is a supernatural entity, is to fight it with a good spiritual supernatural entity. Obviously, there's so many people out there that don't understand that. I've said this before, we are basically collateral damage in the eyes of the supernatural. Because the supernatural, they're still going to be the supernatural after we're dead and gone. After our houses has depleted, after a tornado has destroyed it, after a flood has gotten it, after it gets burnt by a major fire that's out of control, the supernatural world is still going to be in existence pertaining to their world. So in reality, their world is actually more in reality than our world is. Now, we don't believe that. We don't think that way. But if you get to looking at it from a reality perspective, the spirit world's world is more realer than our world. Because eventually everything that we're looking at, it don't matter if it's a tree, it don't matter if it's a car, it don't matter if it's a human being, it don't matter. Eventually, one day, everything that you and I are looking at will dissolve. Whenever it talks in the Bible that God is going to recreate a new heaven and a new earth, that's exactly what it means. That means all the former things will have been dissolved, erased, taken away. And that's the part that most people cannot grasp, because they're still engulfed, or they're still attracted to this world versus the supernatural world.
Need to send immigration judges to the border and get these cases heard in days and not years. And if they do not qualify.
All right, immigration judges. He also spoke about transporting these illegal immigrants back to Mexico. Who's going to pay for the bus? Who's going to pay for the driver of the bus? Who's going to pay for all the fuel that goes in the bus? Or if you use an airplane, who's going to pay for all those services? All these are dwindling effects pertaining to the American resources that are being strained every day on account of poor leadership. And if we do not hurry up and regain control over what is going on, whenever the ship goes under completely, there'll be no survivors. In other words, we're seeing the boat get punctured with more and more holes every day pertaining to the American system that is already broken. And we know that it's broken. But if we don't have good leadership that knows how to repair these holes to where we're no longer sinking, then guess what's going to eventually happen? We're going to sink. In other words, the whole system is going to crash, and whenever it does, woe be unto us as a society, not just an American society, but a global society. Because whenever that occurs, that will open up a venue for these communist-controlled countries that will think with their aggressiveness, that's how they're going to become dominant towards being superiority above and beyond the Democrat parties. If we're not smart enough, my friends, to identify what we're up against here, we're never, ever going to be able to work our way out of this very difficult moment that has fallen upon to not just the American people, but any free, fair, open republic that is on the planet right now. And I know that sounds overwhelming. I know that sounds incredibly outstanding, or whatever word that you want to use. But the fact of the matter is, we are under siege. We are under attack. And I continue to keep telling my viewers this again and again and again, that it's a verification of what the book of Revelations out of the King James Version Bible teaches that was going to occur in the last days. For it says that Satan will come down. He comes down. In other words, he's powerful. He's in the spirit world. He comes down in the form of storms. He comes down in the form of tornadoes. He comes down in the form of what we have done to our own selves pertaining to messing up with the ecosystem and the heat dome above our heads pertaining to the upper atmosphere. He comes down in the form of droughts. He comes down in the form of floods. He comes down in the form of diseases. He comes down in the form of disasters and the oil petroleum companies being greedy and not willing to look at the whole truth versus only parts of the truth and lies to the American people and the world. He comes down in the form of the Ukrainian war going on right now that's being improvised by maniacs over there in Russia. As far as I'm concerned, we're going to have to grab a hold of the moment that we're in right now. If not, it will be the doom to us all. And I continue to keep telling people that, and people continue to keep ignoring me. Like I'm the one that's the monster. Like I'm the one that's creating all of this. I'm not the bad guy. That's another area that people need to become discerned with. They need to figure out who they are, first of all, what side they're on pertaining to the side of history, and they need to be able to rightfully be able to make decisions on who is actually for them versus who is basically an imposter. And that is the reason why that we're at where we are today, is because of so many people that could not make those rational, righteous decisions towards who was actually for them and against them. Whenever it reaches the point that the government can no longer govern itself, pertaining to the internal fundamental problems that we're having right now all over this great nation, then how do you expect for this government to govern its people? Whenever we have a government cannot protect itself pertaining to hackers, diseases, and everything else, how can you really expect for this government, called America, our American government, how can you really expect for it to protect its people whenever it can't even protect itself? Get real.
Actually, what you've done is you've encouraged those that have come over illegally, and these people have come over illegally into our country, and you're giving them the access to work. It undermines everything that we're doing in Congress to try to come together. The real solution is finding Venezuela, working with Venezuela and other countries to take back some of their people. I'd love to see Secretary Blinken. I'm going to meet with him next week. I'd love to see Secretary Blinken spend more time in the hemisphere solving these difficult issues with some of our foreign allies and partners.
Speaker McCarthy has said there are going to be some border-related provisions in this potential continuing resolution. You just laid out a whole bunch of things you want. If those are put on the table, would you change your mind on a short-term deal?
You know, Margaret, there's a difference between fantasy and reality, and I live in reality. My district is hit with the realities of this border crisis. So I'm not looking for a messaging bill that says all the right things and accomplishes nothing. It's, once again, why I sat down with Secretary Mayorkas this week and said, what are some real, tangible things that we can accomplish today? So in my eyes, a continuing resolution that just has fake things doesn't get us any closer. What we need to do is draw a hard line in the sand and pass appropriation bills and move that over to the Senate and work with the Senate to get this ultimately signed by the president.
All right, Congressman, thank you very much. And the time clock is ticking on that. Face the Nation will be back in 1 minute, so stay with us. Ukraine count on the
meeting today at creativeplanning.com.
We go now to Arizona Democratic Senator Mark Kelly. He is in Austin, Texas this morning. Senator, it is great to have you back on the program. Thank you. You just came back from Ukraine, and you met as well with President Zelensky this week here in Washington. Can Ukraine count on that $20 billion that President Biden is asking Congress for?
Well, Margaret, thank you for having me on. This is my second trip to Ukraine. I went in April. I had the chance to meet with commanders, U.S. military commanders, Ukrainian, Polish. The aid that we are giving them is critical. If this was to stop, they would lose and Putin would win. So I am, motivated to get this done in the United States Senate. There's bipartisan support for this in a CR, providing funding for Ukraine. And we've got to get this across the finish line or this would be a disaster.
Bipartisan support in a short-term deal, you said. Would you vote for a short-term deal if it didn't have Ukraine aid in it? I'm asking you this because the House, there's a problem getting this through.
Hey, for years when we've done CRs, they've been bipartisan. Senator McConnell feels like we should continue to support Ukraine. Senator Schumer as well. Working across the aisle in the Senate, we can get this done. The dysfunction in the House is unprecedented. Do you know who really cares about whether or not we fund Ukraine or not and continue to provide the support? It's the Chinese president. This has implications across the globe. I spent some private time with President Zelensky, just this last week and, try to reassure him that this is coming. And if we fail at this moment, there's a chance that we, a year from now, 2 years from now, we wind up in a situation where we could be in direct conflict with the Russians. We do not want that.
CBS has confirmed that President Biden, in his meeting with President Zelensky, said he would provide Ukraine with ATACMS. These are these longer-range surface-to-surface missile systems that would allow them to hit behind Russian lines. The Ukrainians have been asking for months for these systems. Whether it's the F-16s or the ATACMS now, are you frustrated at how long it takes for approval to happen for these systems?
Yeah, I mean, this conflict's been going on for a year and a half now. And in the beginning, we provided artillery, ammunition, eventually HIMARS. F-16s are not like other weapon systems. They're complicated. You have to train pilots. You have to train maintainers. I worked with the administration on that. We've gotten them cluster weapons now. ATACMS is an additional capability. There were some issues we had to work through. They've been, stressing the need for this over a period of time now, and we're at the point that we're going to provide them this capability, and I think it's going to be helpful.
What restrictions should there be? Why the apprehension for so long?
Well, an artillery shell goes about 18 miles. An ATACMS missile goes about 190 miles. So there was concern where and against what targets would they use them. We don't want this to escalate. But we're at the spot right now where they need an additional capability to maintain some more progress. The progress on this counteroffensive, it's been good. I talked to Ukrainian commanders. There are things that are, starting to provide some, problems, but we're making progress there.
Mm-hmm. Very quickly, should Senator Bob Menendez resign from his position?
Well, these are serious and shocking charges. Bribery, corruption. I've never seen anything like this. He stepped down from being chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. That's a serious step. I think Senator Menendez is going to have to think long and hard about the cloud that's going to hang over his service in the United States Senate.
Well, he is up for re-election. It sounds like you are drawing attention to some questions about that. I have to take a quick...
I mean, he's going to be in...
Sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say he was going to be in court next week.
Yeah.
And he's going to figure out whether he can adequately serve the people of New Jersey.
I have to take a quick break and continue this conversation with you on the other side of it. Senator, stay with us. We'll be right back.
Once more, if our government cannot govern itself towards making sure things is handled appropriately from within, we're only deceiving ourselves by thinking that they're going to be able to govern the things that the people need pertaining to our own safety and well-being.
If you miss an episode of Face the Nation or want to see an extended interview, you can find it all on YouTube and our website. Or if you prefer to listen, you can subscribe to our podcast. Just search Face the Nation. We'll be right back.
I personally believe, this is just my belief about the Ukrainian ordeal, that they wouldn't be going through what they're going through right now if somebody didn't make a decision towards basically bamboozling them, of them taking away their ace in the hole pertaining to their nuclear armament that they had originally in Ukraine. That whenever either our administration or somebody made a deal that we was going to take care of the Ukrainian people, if anything ever like this ever occurred towards them being a basically a republic country or democratic country, that right there spoke volumes pertaining to the oligarchs in Russia. Towards now, we have got them to the point that now, even if it does turn into a Potsy war, because the Ukrainians no longer have nuclear armament, we can bring destruction to that. We can basically bring a genocide to that people. And I think what boosted their decisions was whenever COVID hit, that in the eyes of the world, looking at it from an international stage, if they didn't cooperate the way that the rest of the countries was cooperating towards sparing their citizens with the COVID, that they would have looked, sure enough, like monsters. So they had to retaliate from their slave whip that they was using up onto their own people, and because of it, it's caused a great deal of people to lose money, and because they've lost money, this is their way of making it up towards going in and basically retaliating against the Ukrainian people that obviously changed their way of thinking and changed their way of life to begin with, going all the way back to the falling of the Berlin Wall. Whenever Ronald Reagan pointed them out that they was an evil empire over there, the way that they was dictating and dominating to their own people. They was still dictating and dominating for 30 plus years after the Berlin Wall fell, but they was doing it in more of a moderate state. Well, now since COVID has hit, they basically throw that ideal out the freaking door, and now they're going to show their true colors to the world towards who they really are. Well, that was the very things that Ronald Reagan said that they was. They was evil. They was evil, and until their own people is willing to open up their eyes to that in Russia towards going up against this evil empire, they're going to continue to basically bathe in their own blood. Not just the blood of the Ukrainians, but the blood of their own. Because eventually, if this escalates to the point of nuclear bombs being blown up or a direct attack either to the United States or to the UK, they will be bathing in their own blood. So you would think by now that their own citizens would have promulgated a coup d'etat towards taking over this illegal evil empire that's now going to cause the death of their own people over there. That's what the people in China was trying to do, and all of a sudden, here come COVID. Scared them, locked them in their places, some of them welded up their doors, and once more, the oligarchs in China are basically in just as much control today as what they was before COVID ever hit. These evil, demonic, uncivilized societies are going to continue to not only hold on to the power that they already have, but they're going to expand. They're going to expand, and eventually they're going to try to take over all the other countries that they're not in control of by using brutal force. And if we cannot see that as a free people here in America, it's just a matter of time before our freedom will be taken from us at the expense of lots of people's blood. That's where this is heading to. It's heading to a third world war that, I don't know, I tend to wonder if our American politicians may be actually implementing that. I mean, they won't tell you that, but I really think that it's a hidden motive there, that they know that they have failed the American people, pertaining to us being $30+ trillion in debt and all the other problems, and because of it, there really ain't no hope in sight. Which goes back to the corporate church world that thought that they was going to be able to pull the wool over not just the American people's eyes, but the world's people's eyes, pertaining towards how Ronald Reagan ever got the agreement with the superpowers to begin with in 1988 after 9 tapes went to the White House. That's the point that I continue to keep harping on and telling people about, and that's the part that they don't want to listen to. After 30+ years, the ministry still stands dormant of no supporters. So that in and of itself speaks volumes about the American corporate churches over here that obviously say one thing about their own personal beliefs, but in reality, the world can see who they really are. So it won't be nobody's fault but the American corporate churches that has allowed for this to fester and get in the shape that it's in. Beginning right here in Northwest Tennessee. The core of origin began right here in Obion County and Weakley County, Northwest Tennessee. That is what will be remembered. That will be what will be written in the history books pertaining to the Homo sapiens, and that will be what is written in the spiritual history books pertaining to the supernatural. And regardless whether they like it or not, regardless whether they think that they should vote on it or not, this is the way the cow's going to eat the cabbage. You know why? Because God's the one that's ultimately in control.
Shutting down. If there's a government shutdown, Border Patrol agents are not going to get paid. This is going to, I mean, if we think it's bad today, just think about what that looks like.
Well, what is the real world impact of that? Tony Gonzalez from Texas was saying, you know, Border Patrol agents, he claims, are being prevented from doing their jobs in the first place right now. And so it wouldn't make that much of a difference. Why do you think practically it really would?
Well, Border Patrol agents are on the front line of this crisis. I mean, so are sheriffs. He mentioned sheriffs, but we've got thousands and thousands of Border Patrol agents on the border enforcing our laws and also processing, you know, asylum seekers. If they stay home, I mean, this crisis will be compounded by an order of magnitude. You know, it's unconscionable to think that Republicans in the House are going to allow the government to shut down under the circumstances we're under today. I mean, there's always been bipartisan support for stopgap spending bills. Having a government shutdown, I mean, it takes off, you know, the growth of our economy is affected. It's going to affect our air traffic control system. If you're going to travel over the holidays and there's a government shutdown, I mean, that's going to impact you. Kids don't get meals when there's government shutdown. The military doesn't get paid. So these things are connected. We've got a crisis at the border, and what the Speaker is allowing to happen in the House of Representatives could make this worse.
Senator Kelly, thank you very much for joining us today. And we turn now to Robert O'Brien. He served as National Security Advisor under former President Trump, and he joins us this morning from Park City, Utah. Ambassador, it's good to have you here with us.
Nice to be with you, Margaret. Thank you.
I want to ask you about a number of national security matters, but I want to start on this idea of a potential government shutdown. National security-wise, what do you think the message is to the world when basic matters of governance seem politically insurmountable and the government shuts down?
Well, what we used to say in the NSC and President Trump's administration was economic security is national security. And we've got too big of a debt, and we've got to get the debt under control. I think Speaker McCarthy's done a great job and negotiated a good deal, and I think that it would be great if the Republicans got behind Speaker McCarthy. But I understand why there's concern over the size of the debt, and I understand the frustration of some of the GOP members. I mean, it's understandable.
Yeah, but I mean, Republicans have objected to even passing defense spending at this point. Aren't we in a sort of dangerous moment?
Well, I came out in favor of passing the NDAA, and I think a lot of our other conservatives like Mike Gallagher and Mike Waltz and others did. So I think we need to get that defense bill passed immediately.
Okay. You were the hostage envoy under President Trump before you became his national security advisor, and you did help bring 3 citizens home from Iran. This week we saw a number of Americans return in a very happy reunion. Siam Aknamazi, Ahmad Shargi, Murad Tabaz. Why wasn't the last administration able to get them out? Why is it so hard to bring home Americans from Iran?
Well, we had unprecedented success in the Trump administration. As you know, Margaret, we brought home over 58 hostages from countries all over the world, North Korea, Iran, Russia. But we had a ground rule. We wouldn't pay ransom. And look, I was so pleased to see Siamak and Murad and the others come home. I felt like I failed them by not getting them home. But we weren't going to pay $6 billion. We were going to pay $1 billion plus per hostage because that creates a market for hostages. It makes your blue passport worth $1 billion. And so I'm concerned that Americans traveling abroad are going to be targeted by countries like Russia and China and Iran, but also terrorist organizations who know that they can get a big ransom if we pay these sorts of fees, and we just weren't prepared to do it. But we had unprecedented success bringing Americans home from all over the world. The other issue, Margaret, is what is Iran going to do with that money? We saw this with the JCPOA. They took that money and they spent it on terrorism and on ballistic missiles and on nuclear programs. I'm afraid they're going to build more drones that kill Ukrainians with the money we just gave them. So I'm thrilled to see Siamak and Murad and the others home, but I'm very concerned about the look of the deal internationally.
Well, as you know, the current administration would argue that those funds are being held in a restricted account in Qatar, just like they were held in a restricted account in South Korea under the Trump administration, where Iran did have access, though they had difficulty getting to that money. Why is that not a sufficient level of protection?
Well, the president of Iran came to the UNGA last week and said he'll use the money any way he pleases, that it's the government money of the people of Iran, and he'll use it however he wants. And we have to understand, Margaret, money is fungible. Yeah. So the money that they're spending now on children's hospitals and on food, they'll use that for the military and for terrorism and take this money and replace it with the other programs. So money is fungible. This money is going to the Iran regime. It's a terrorist regime. It's the largest state sponsor of terrorism. And it's going to kill a lot of people, unfortunately.
Should travel be banned to Iran?
I believe so, absolutely. The problem is this happened after the JCPOA when we paid hundreds of millions per hostage. The price went up the price went up from Obama to Biden, but as soon as they let a couple of hostages go, Jason Rezar and others, they just restocked the pool of hostages. They went and took a few more dual citizens who were visiting family in Iran. And took them hostage. So we've got to stop Americans going to Iran, but we've got to start thinking about Americans going to China and Russia as well, where they're taking hostages and using this against us.
I want to ask you about national security as it relates to the upcoming U.S. election as well. You have been very clear that Joe Biden won the 2020 election. You helped with the transition of power between administrations. CNN reported you considered resigning after January the 6th. Is that report true?
That's an inaccurate report. I had never considered resigning. My feeling as National Security Advisor is that you took the job for the good days and the bad days. And that
was a pretty bad day.
That was a bad day, but we had the Abraham Accords, we had Serbia-Kosovo, we got NATO to spend money defending themselves, which is now helping Ukraine. So President Trump had a really successful foreign policy run. But there are bad days too, and that was a bad day. But I was going to stick around for the president and for the American people. And fortunately, I had a lot of senators and congressmen who reached out and said, "Please stay. We've got foreign adversaries, China and Russia. Yeah. We'll want to take advantage of the chaos." And so Mike Pompeo and John Radcliffe and myself, the national security team, Chris Miller over at Defense, we stuck around and we sent a strong message to the Chinese. We sent a strong message to the Russians that the American people are united, that we remain fundamentally strong. And we're not going to let them take advantage of any domestic political discord in the United States. And I think that served the president well, and I think it served the American people well.
Well, given Donald Trump's role in the events leading to that day, I wonder if you would serve in a second Trump administration.
Look, I had a great run as National Security Advisor and as a hostage envoy, and I served the country well, I think. And But you always have to wait and see what the President of the United States asks you to do and what your family wants to do. But I grew up in a household with a dad who was a Marine and a mom who was a big patriot. And by the way, it's her 80th birthday today, so happy birthday, Mom. And my feeling is if the President asks you to serve, and I've got kids who are serving in the military, you salute and say yes. So, but that's really up to President Trump if he wins, which I right now, according to the Washington Post, he's up by 10 points. So it looks good for him, but that's up to him and my family.
You don't have any doubts?
Well, I think there's going to be a great team, and I think we need to return. America looks weak now. We're not weak. We're fundamentally strong, but America looks very weak right now. We have to return to a posture of peace or strength, or we're going to have real problems with China, with Russia, with Iran in the future. And so I think anyone who believes in peace or strength and is asked to serve and has the experience to do so should do so and defend America. Absolutely.
And I know you cannot talk about the details of the two investigations brought by the special counsel, Jack Smith, because you were subpoenaed. So we have to leave that part of the conversation there. Robert O'Brien, thank you very much for joining us on Face the Nation. We'll be right back.
Welcome to Ameriprise.
I'm Sam Morris, and my brother Max recommended you.
So my best friend Sophie says you've been a huge help.
At Ameriprise Finance.
It's really sad that all this began over in Kenton, Tennessee with a small amount of group of people that, first of all, did not understand my motives towards wanting to help people that had problems, regardless whether it was glaucoma, regardless whether it was people having convulsions pertaining to legalizing marijuana. And then on top of that, greed set in to the point that now we have different individuals here in not only Weakley County, but throughout every county that have become dominant forces in bringing or allowing for drugs to come into this area. You want to know where it all began? Right here. This is the core of origin that I continue to keep telling people about. Beginning in 1983, whenever I made a telephone call to the White House about the Antichrist. That at that time, 40 plus years ago, nobody wanted to listen to, or nobody could comprehend or understand what I was talking about. Because of my teachings and the gifts that had been given to me, knowing about end-time biblical Bible prophecy. You want to know what's got us into all this? Between greed, stupidity, people deliberately acting ignorant, you got it. I mean, it can't be no more obvious than what I'm telling people about. It's just a matter of time before people listen to it and say, you know what? Maybe this guy knows what he's talking about. I do. I know exactly what I'm talking about. And the only thing that I can do at this point in time, that every time something occurs that I told you that was going to occur, is to sit back in the corner and twiddle my thumbs and put my thumb against my nose and say, 90-90 boo-boo, I told you so. I told you it was happening. I told you it was going to happen. I told you it was going to get worse. I told you what was going on. And nobody wanted to listen.
Government interpreter. We began by asking her about what life is like for Ukrainian children.
Unfortunately, only 1/3 of Ukrainian children can now attend school because our schools have to be safe, to be located in safe areas, and we need schools with bomb shelters. And my foundation continues fundraising resources to ensure that we have comfortable bomb shelters in all Ukrainian schools. Well, the rest of Ukrainian children, 2/3, continue going to school online because they live in kind of frontline areas. Many children left Ukraine, they live abroad. When children were leaving Ukraine, sometimes they could only take their documents with them and left everything behind. That is why both children and teachers require laptops, require iPads to continue education, and we receive a lot of support, including from our American partners.
You spoke at the United Nations, and you said to a gathering of leaders there the horrific sexual violence being conducted by the Russian military, including against children, a 4-year-old child. What was it like in that room when you shared that?
We say that there are sexual crimes committed by Russian occupiers, and this is a war crime. Leadership of the Russian army allows Russian soldiers to do this. This is something they commit consciously. They try to threaten population in Ukraine to demonstrate that they are in charge. When we address people from many countries and share these terrible numbers with them, indeed you see pain in the eyes of those people, you feel horror, but this is not enough. We have to unite our efforts to ensure that those who committed those crimes face justice. Sometimes people are concerned, this is a taboo in many cases to say that and acknowledge that you've been a victim of sexual crime. You need to be truly courageous to let others know that you become a victim yourself. And people will only start talking about it when they will see that those who committed those crimes have been taken to justice. We know from witnesses, from people who saw those crimes being committed, from neighbors, that in some villages all women were raped. But not all those crimes have been documented, because there are people who do not want to officially provide evidence about those crimes.
That's a powerful statement. You need to be courageous to admit you've been a victim. You know, your husband, President Zelensky, said that genocide is underway in Ukraine. He said Russians had elected their own Hitler. These are powerful statements, and I wonder, given the stakes of what you're talking about, how you think about, in a capital like this, debate over whether to help continue Ukraine or not.
Well, clearly, it is a natural reaction of any individual who lives in a country which became a victim of genocide. You become deeply concerned that some people cannot understand what's going on. But we hope that all Americans understand what's going on, and we do not believe that this assistance that we now receive from Americans will stop. Of course, there are political debates, there are discussions, there are different opinions, some people agree, they disagree. This is a democracy. But nevertheless, truth has to win, because it is clear that truth is on Ukraine's side.
Part of genocide is destroying a culture, and you've been working to get Ukrainian books out publicly. So the Metropolitan Museum of Art, getting things translated. Is that your way of fighting back?
It is one of the ways for us to demonstrate who we really are. Culture is also the area of the battlefield. We see that the occupiers want to destroy our culture. We see hundreds of libraries which have been burned by the occupiers. Thousands of museums and cultural institutions have been destroyed. By destroying our identity, they just want to destroy our nation. And that is why we have to inform about our culture, and this is an important factor of our work.
The president also said Ukraine knows the names of tens of thousands of children and has evidence hundreds of thousands of other kids have been kidnapped by Russia. Do those children get to know their culture? What happens to them when Russia takes them? And how do you get them back?
We know about 19.5 thousand children who were officially deported. These are the children who are currently on the occupied territory, and we know that cases have been documented, they have been taken to Russia. We managed to return back approximately 380 children. We have the list of children who are being looked for by their parents. There were a lot of children who studied in orphanages and boarding schools, and those boarding schools were taken to Russia as an institution. This is a true problem, because these are kids. Sometimes they do not fully understand what's going on. It is easy to manipulate them, manipulate their emotions. Almost all children whom we managed to return to Ukraine told us that in Russia they were told that no one cares about them in Ukraine, that no one is looking for them. They been preparing them for adoption on the territory of the Russian Federation. So they try to make them leave their roots, so to say, make them forget that they're Ukrainians. Of course, children who almost reach their adulthood, they have great understanding of what's going on, but small children can be much more susceptible to this Russian disinformation. And that is why, when we spoke at the United Nations, we proposed to develop a new system of joint efforts that would make Russia return Ukrainian children to their country. We are responsible for these children. We cannot play with those children's destinies. It is not human.
There's a warrant out for Vladimir Putin's arrest because of this program.
Було б чудово, якщо б цей арест мав би фізичний наслідок.
This was a very powerful political statement, and we very much hope that one day this statement will be fully implemented.
I do want to ask you, you were a comedy writer before the war. Former.
Yeah.
And now you have this extraordinary life and circumstance, and you've sacrificed a lot with your family. Do you get to spend time with your children and your husband together as a family?
Ні, знаєте,
No, I have no complaints, because when you see what's happening to people close to you, the problems of our family cannot be compared to those things which are currently faced by other Ukrainian families. Children die, children are being killed.
можу бути зі своїми дітьми
The president lives at work. Sometimes we see each other once a week. Sometimes we see each other several times a week. But my children next to me, and I'm confident that we will overcome, because we know what is the goal, what is the final goal. We have to see our victory. We have to see happy faces around us.
When people in America think of Ukraine, they think of President Zelensky and your family. How would you feel about him running again in 2024 if elections are held?
Це дуже складне для мене.
Well, this is a very difficult question for me.
Я не була прихильницею його.
You know, even when he ran for the first time, I didn't fully endorse it. But if he runs again, if he runs for the second time, if he decides that it is necessary, well, we have some experience. We've been there. It is not as scary as it was in the first time. I don't know whether he has made this decision or not. It will depend on the situation in our country and the situation and the possibility of organizing free and fair elections. It will also depend whether our society would need him as a president. If he will feel that Ukrainian society will no longer wish him to be the president, he will probably not run. But I will support him, whatever decision he takes.
Whatever decision. Madam First Lady, thank you, Madam Zelenska, for your time.
Thank you for your time.
You can watch our extended conversation on facethenation.com. We'll be back in a moment.
Now that was an extensive, good interview by Miss Margaret. She's very talented in how that she
It's right here.
CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
CBS News.
how that she
60
approaches
minutes
people
tonight.
and getting the information out of them. She's very good. She's very talented.
Are we gonna hear questions about substance?
Very talented. You know, I think I want to stop right here and going outside just momentarily. But you know, I hear it said, not so much today as what I did whenever I was growing up 35, 40, 50 years ago, whenever I started paying attention to different things that was being said. But even to this day, I still hear it mentioned from time to time. What business is it of ours towards trying to get involved in other people's affairs all over the world, that we don't have no right in policing the world? And in one perspective, I can understand what they're talking about, but especially in today's society, in the 21st century, with so much modern day technology and the way that everybody depends upon each other pertaining to us being a global society, I really don't think that they understand the concept that if one thing happens to one country, it will eventually affect all the other countries. It will eventually affect all the other continents. In other words, out of the 7 continents, if something drastically happens to one continent, it's going to affect all the other continents. So whenever people make those statements today in the 21st century, the year 2023, this is September the 23rd or 24th, to me, it's a very undermining, ignorant statement to make, that what business is it of ours toward what goes on the other side of the pond. I got news for you. Whatever goes on the other side of the pond will affect what goes on over here. And if you don't believe me, go fill your gas tank up and see the differences in the price of gas. Yesterday I got out and I cut a little bit on that tree right there towards trimming it down, or that bush. I guess I'm going to eventually cut those other 2 right there off from that one, just leaving the one, and then I'll probably cut the one down even shorter, trying to balance that whole thing out right there. That way one bush don't exceed or overpower the other bushes, especially whenever I got the oak tree growing in the middle like that. But I just wanted to show my viewers that I still am in the transit motion towards refurbishing the Purple Heart Dragon Memorial Site here at 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 38255. Thank you for listening. God bless, and good luck to all of us. And shalom. The reason why I told my viewers that that's considered nostalgia is that back whenever I was a child growing up, I'm 62, we didn't have to lock up things. We didn't have to put things in garages and sheds and lock them up. And basically the kids in whatever neighborhood that they was in took their bicycles and either put them on the grass, or ordinarily we always leaned it against the tree. That way when we got out here mowing, we didn't have to worry about having to move the bicycles. We just leaned it against the tree and left them there until the next time we got ready to get on it and go. But that's what, to me, old nostalgia is about, towards looking at the past, preparing for the future. God bless. God bless America, and shalom.